Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, 4 Nerds by Nerds Hangout. This nerd.
I'm Ted.
And today we're working on the three pillar foundation, the 3 C's of building a character concept, and that is crazy character concepts.
If you want to jump down to the description below, you can sign up for Nerdarchy, the newsletter. It's a great way to get gaming tips, as well as learn how to game with Nerdarchy.
So in this character concept building video, we're going to discuss those off-kilter, off-the-wall characters that you've come up with in your games. So a great one that I had watched online, I believe it was on AJ Pickett's channel, and that was... he ran a Palladium system Heroes game, and it was the Tick, right? The Tick universe. And the idea was all the players showed up with their characters done completely in the Tick style.
Nice.
And they were trying out to be superheroes with the Tick and Arthur when a supervillain attacks.
Nice.
And I believe one of the characters' name was American Beard.
American Beard.
And all of his powers were, he had a super huge long beard, and all of his powers were basically around controlling his beard and using his beard in combat, like turning it into a big fist to punch people, probably swinging from lampposts, that kind of thing, to travel.
Wow.
Andrew Knapp was in that game, and he played the possum. And I believe like his only superpower was to play dead. Like I know like in this is a spoiler if you haven't watched that game or you plan to watch that game, was basically he charged the villain and the motorcycle like exploded, and he laid on the ground playing dead for the whole entire combat until the end. He jumped up and sucker punched him for the win or something.
That's hysterical. In 3rd edition, there were templates galore for D&D, and there was one that like you had like goo like pouring out of your neck or your ears. Do you remember that one?
No.
By any chance? Well, I had made a character for one of your crazy games. It was you had to use a template. We used the rules where you had 2 classes at once. Gestalt, that's it. And then to make things worse, I was an orc that, specialized in whatever the skill for 3rd edition was in food preparation. So, like, obviously,
cooking?
was there actually skill at cooking?
Probably.
3rd edition had a bunch. And that was where he did it. Like, nobody cared that he could make really awesome food because he had that ectoplasmic template. So there was like goo leaking out the side of his head.
He looked like a snot monster.
Yes.
Which that kind of brings us to one of the characters that was in one of my games, and this was a more serious game, a superhero game for me. It's a Mastermind where Jim played Sludge.
Yep.
And Sludge accidentally died in this. He was actually creating this horrible experiment where he actually he killed everyone involved and absorbed them into his body, and he just became this big sludge monster.
Right.
And he didn't speak much. He didn't have much of a vocabulary, and basically
he would get along really well with Groot and Hodor.
Yeah, exactly. But I think he had a little bit more of a vocabulary than that. Yeah. But basically after I think part of his personality got wiped out, but he knows he did something bad.
Right.
And so everything he relearned, he kind of relearned from hobos in the sewers, and that kind of reset his character's personality and stuff.
So there's plenty of off-the-wall characters and archetypes that have been made that, while they are ridiculous, they become a useful asset to a campaign.
Yeah, I mean they're still playable, even through novels and stuff. In Dragonlance, there was quite a few with Kender. As well as Fizzban was a character who would pop in and out, which actually turned out to be one of the gods. But
Well, sometimes
befuddled wizards make excellent characters for this. In 5th edition, I only got to play him one time, but I actually created a gnome illusionist, and his I forget his name, Sandy Frecklefoot, I think was his name, right? So instead of using the spell components, he used arcane focus, and he used the sphere or orb. Mm-hmm. And I asked my GM, I was like, "Can I make the orb a fishbowl?" And he's like, you could do that. And then so his familiar was a quipper. Because that's actually on the list of familiars, right? It's a freaking fish. It's basically a piranha, right? In a fishbowl that he would carry around and channel his spells through. Well, because he was an urchin, part of your gear as an urchin is a mouse.
Right.
And because he was a forest gnome, he could speak with small woodland creatures. And because he was a wizard, he could speak to his familiar. So I would literally, like, you know, role play, and the concept as it went on further would be discussions between the mouse and the familiar and me, and sometimes me being like the in-between man, because like the mouse is like, can we just cook that thing on a fire? And you know, the quipper is always like, can you drop the mouse in the bowl? You know, so it was kind of like a bit of a comic relief thing, but yeah, I thought it was fun and interesting to do for that character.
Well, when you mix gnome, wizard, and illusionist, you tend to get some pretty crazy stuff. Because I also made the same, you know, the same character build, but I made mine an entertainer, and you know, he had
no mouse for you.
He didn't have the mouse, but he could talk to creatures, and it happened to be in the one game that you were running online, and there wound up being crazy stuff that happened.
Trouble with prospectors. Yes.
That's it. So there was a mushroom, and I convinced it to sing, and I took it along. But
Ted, mushrooms can't sing or talk.
Well, this one could.
Oh, what happens?
There was the plane of chaos affected the world, and there was a mushroom that had the ability to talk, and it was a giant mushroom. So we
Well, giant is kind of relative in D&D terms, because I mean you literally have myconic kings that are large.
True. I assume like by giant, I'm thinking like
18 inches or so. Yeah.
So Freckle Gurglelop was mine.
Yes.
And he spelled freckle very differently, and he would argue with you if you know tried to correct it, like, oh, you're talking about like no, it's all different. It's EL instead of LE, and that was
his thing.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, and the mushroom it wasn't humanoid or anything like that. It was just literally
just
a big
a
mushroom
mushroom
with a face that could talk.
And he transplanted it back to Griffin Gaff, and
some of your companions did, you know, try to convince you to make mushroom stew out of it and stuff.
They tried, but I would have none of it.
Yeah. So are there any other characters? Like, we've had all kinds, you know, visit the table over the years.
Well, the I would say to some extent the Nate Thief could be considered a bit crazy.
Okay, so the Nate Thief, for you guys that are wondering, perhaps you've seen Nate the Nerd Art that's in some of our videos and has returned from elsewhere.
Woot woot.
So Nate's kind of a big, ungainly kind of guy, and we had this little scrawny kind of Chihuahua-like guy that used to play with us. I don't know. He looked like a deranged Chihuahua to me.
Now, Mike earned the nickname correctly, Psycho.
He left our group when he went and joined the Marines, and he was literally like this big.
He crested 5 foot, but not by much. And Psycho decided he wanted to make a character that was going to be a rogue.
Well, no, we have to frame it, because we made our characters a specific way.
Okay.
3d6 straight down, 1s or 6s.
Right.
And so, you know, after he got his stats, he might have decided beforehand that he was going to play Nate.
Okay.
Or I don't know if he actually told us he was playing Nate, but
It came out that, you know, he was saying, I'm playing Nate. However it came to be. But we rolled the stats straight down, so however they lied, that was the character that you were making. And, you know, you could, once the stats were there, you could do whatever you wanted with them. And he had, like, a 12 or a 13 dex and an 18 strength and a pretty decent intelligence, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And he's like, boom, I'm going rogue.
Going to be a thief. I don't remember if we were playing 3.5 at that point. If we were
it was 3.5.
Yeah, we just moved over. Yeah, so his thief looked like Nate. And then if oddly enough, in that same campaign, we had the farm boy wizard. So he had a high strength. I think he also had a high intelligence as well, but he had a high strength because he came from the farm and was a reluctant adventurer. One of the ones that I thought of too was again Andrew Knapp, one of his characters, Sir Roderick, I believe. He decided to play. I believe it was I don't know if he was a paladin or a fighter. Either he was a fighter that wanted to be a paladin, and he finally became a paladin, or he was just a fighter that still longed to be a paladin. But they were on their 3-6 kick with stats, and he ended up with really piss poor physical stats. So he made him an old man, an elderly man.
Okay.
So Sir Roderick, the fighter, warrior, paladin, it was like in his 70s. So he had really bad physical stats, and that's kind of how he explained it. I'm sure, like, there's always, like, I know, like, Mike Gould talks about his half-ogre character that's a cook, that tries to cook everything.
Well, anytime you get into the off-kilter or the, all right, I've played everything under the sun, what can I play now to be different? You start getting into those spectrums. And, like, there was a time where wearing the pelts or skulls of your adversaries wasn't such a weird thing, and Alan, in your game, he's literally decorated with them, and some things I think are actually well bigger than he could feasibly wear, and I'll do it anyway. He's got the strength to hold it, so
he almost looks comical at this point. In a
so
grotesque way.
that kind of gets ridiculous. But then you can also go in the other direction where you add reluctant to it that you had brought up, and that springs Giles.
Yes.
Which, of all of the reluctant characters I've ever seen at the table, none have performed better than my friend Jim's Giles the wizard, because he made a wizard, and the NPC that he apprenticed under forced him to go out into the world and actually adventure,
gain real world experience,
and like almost every single spell that he had in his spell book was utterly useless, and he did it on purpose. He made a spell selection that was based on, hey, what spells could I take to make it useful in the library? And like, he didn't have any desire to be in the real world. He didn't want to leave the building, let alone the town.
And part of the deal was his master wouldn't teach him anymore unless
he went out and did it. Yeah. And we did have one time where he was holding his lantern. Someone missed with an attack, rolled a natural 1.
Psycho did. and then so we back then to like critical fail. So all right, well, make an attack roll on somebody, randomly chose, the dice chose him. Oh, that's a 20. Critted him, dropped him.
Which caused the lantern to ignite his robes on fire.
Yeah, well, he fell in the lantern and caught on fire, yeah. I think it was like a 50-50.
Then Psycho decided, well, the best way to put him out is to roll him into the water. So now he's unconscious,
on fire, and
drowning. Now, technically, you can't be drowning and on fire at the same time. So I believe that you actually rolled the fire went out, but it was like, oh my god.
Yeah. Jim still hates me to this day because of that and other things. Those campaigns were a lot of fun and could be harsh. So there was that. I think we'd be remiss talking about kind of like comical, ridiculous, crazy characters without at least in passing mentioning the Goblins.
Oh, true.
So, the Cardboard Fortress, Anthony and Nicole wanted to play characters in my game, and they wanted to be Goblins. So I didn't put a whole lot of work into it. I'm like, let's just follow the serial numbers off a halfling and paint them green. Boom, you have a Goblin. And then on top of that, they're like, well, our Goblins are actually juggalos. Now, I don't know about you, but I didn't actually know what a juggalo was. I didn't realize like they're the groupies and fans of the Insane Clown Posse. Right. And there's a whole culture that goes around them. And so they basically modeled their goblin tribe, their goblin culture, off of juggalos. So they're always looking to get high and looking to get drunk and looking to get wasted. Like, they reflavored their good berries to good mushrooms. and there was one encounter that I had planned for an evil druid, and it turns out I didn't even have to make him evil to make him an adversary of the party, because the Goblins were bored and on a scouting mission, so they decided the best way to entertain themselves was capture all the small woodland creatures around them and force them to get high. And then they may or may not have been throwing them over a wall. So, like, soon after that, I had this encounter with this evil druid, which obviously, their antics would have pissed off a regular druid, so it wasn't even necessary to make the druid evil.
It's true. It's so true.
And they always do ridiculous things in the. I'm sure some of you guys have seen the gameplays where, like, they love to do disguises, but their disguises is always of a big person with one of them standing or sitting on the shoulders of the other one, and they're also both entertainers as well.
Right.
So, and that's in that case, like those characters, even though they're still actually super effective in the game, but the stuff that they do is utterly ridiculous, and the stuff that they make their characters do are ridiculous. Like the prime example would be like Ryan's like, I have polymorph and I can twin spell. Do you guys want me to twin spell you guys into T-Rexes? And Anthony's like, well, if you ask me, I'm like, no, that's a horrible choice because it totally it kind of nerfs my character actually on what I can do. Mm-hmm. But if you ask Pickle, the Goblo, he's gonna be, fuck yeah, turn me into a T-Rex. Can you launch me from a catapult first? So there's a lot of fun we've had with these different kind of characters and stories.
There's times that you do have to get away from the serious all the time, and there's times that you want to stick to that, and there's always moments for those. So I enjoy getting that ridiculous at times, and even though the adventures that fit into those reluctant or weird things, like that's going to fit into D&D, and you can play those things seriously and be able to step out into the ridiculous when nature calls for it.
And sometimes, sometimes you're not actually planning it; it just kind of happens. Mm-hmm. Like this also happened in one of my games where it was actually a different Mutants and Mastermind game with Jim and also our friend Chris was playing. And his idea was to play a vampire, but he wanted to be an old man. And he totally set himself up because he kind of had this idea in his head, and what actually ended up coming to the table because it's funny and we're gamers and we can be dicks sometimes. We couldn't get past the Grantpire jokes that ensued for the rest of that campaign.
I didn't even remember Grantpire until you brought it up.
Yeah, so there's all kinds of good stuff like that, and I'm sure there's tons of good stuff in your games, and we'd love to hear about them in the comments below. While you're at it, like, share, and subscribe.
You can tweet at us at Nerdarchy.
So until next time,
stay nerdy.